Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Roswell, New Mexico. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I like the beginning parts of the episode too, because it's like the fact is that Isabel's constantly popping up around everyone when they're kind of in some very I get sexual positions, because it's like Max and Liz being like, I want to put on pants, to make sure we're in pants by the time your sister gets here. And the moment Isabel gets there, she's like, hey, I'm here, you guys wearing pants? And then she walks in on Michael and Isabel. She was like, Michael and Maria, and I love her just being like, hey, 5 second, I'm coming in 5 seconds, make room for Jesus type of thing. And it's just like, whoa, it's just kind of like this. I love that being a bit, but obviously like they're all going to track down, Michael, Alex, Isabel, and Max are all going to try and track down Isabel and Max's mom, Louise. And obviously they bring in, Maria along, because Maria wanted to also use this as an opportunity to look into the necklace a little bit, because apparently like that place that photo of Louise was taken, it's a place where Alex grew up. And so he recognized it because that's the hometown his mom, well, not grew up, but that's the hometown his mom was from. And I thought it was interesting because because I was wondering about that whole situation, because it's like, but it showed that she had died. So I was like, how that whole situation happened? It's like Tripp ended up saving her at the last second. Like he took her to Harrison, and it's like, obviously like Harrison and him knew each other from the military and stuff like that. It's like for Harrison, it's like he didn't want to get involved because it's like this was going to lead the military to his door. And he's like, I don't want them, like, you're putting me and my people at risk by bringing her here, So, because it's like, oh, where's she from? He's just like, she's from up further north. So it's like, So I guess like Harrison in that moment understood everything, like him referencing that and everything. But obviously for Tripp, it's like he made a promise to Nora to protect Louise. It was meant to be both of them, but obviously his brother, things didn't work out. And I thought it was interesting because we end up getting that conversation. Well, we get that conversation later on because Isabel and Max go inside of his head. But the whole thing of like, he wanted to protect Louise because like for him, it's like, he's like, I'm a Christian man. And that basically when the devil tells you to kill a woman, you decide you're against it, even when that devil is your brother himself, So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. There had to be a complicated situation of like your brother, it's like, it seems like Jesse is so easy to kind of sway. Like that's so interesting considering like what Tripp ended up being and how Jesse ended up. It makes you wonder, like, how did that, like, even though he looked up, I guess because Jesse, for Jesse, he only saw the sides of his uncle Tripp that Tripp wanted to see. Like, Tripp had to keep up appearances. So I guess, like, that's all Jesse grew up seeing. And so I guess Tripp kind of played the part, I guess. Like, sadly, maybe he played it too well. But it seemed like he was trying to at least sway Jesse from going down the route as, like, his brother, and just kind of, like, hoping that Jesse wouldn't end up like, what I meant was he doesn't end up like Tripp's brother. Is kind of what I was getting at. So I'm curious, to kind of dive into that, like how Jesse. I guess it just took like his grandfather, like passing it down to kind of to his father that got passed on, well, to his son, which got passed on to Jesse. So I'm thinking like maybe that's kind of how Jesse ended up down that route rather than more like Tripp in that regard. But nevertheless. It's interesting to go out. Once again, like Alex has another brother. Maybe they referenced that in season 1. I didn't remember, but the fact is, it's such interesting because that actor is like from those Mutual Liberty commercials. He's the one that kind of they have to dub over. Like I was like, oh, I recognize you, and that's just immediately where my mind went. But obviously, like Luis's grave is there, and obviously there's another grave. It's like, wait, she had a baby. So now it's like Max and Isabel had a sister that died. So it's just kind of like, I was like, oh man, that sucks, so, but Isabel looks into, it's like, they can't talk to, Harrison because of the, age and everything, but like they're able to go inside his mind and he's prepared. Like Isabel, Luis trained him on like how her whole situation works. So she kind of like trained him like, in a place where it's like when you're to escape pain, you go to a good place. So he's in a younger version of himself where he's not in pain and stuff like that. So he ends up telling that story and explaining, because it turns out that Luis did have the baby. They faked the baby's death, because it's like for her, she's like, the devil is coming, and for her it's like she wants to protect her child and everything, especially in the condition she's in, because she did get paralyzed. But later, as we see, like we learn from later on, it's like that obviously didn't stop her from trying to do what she can to help people regardless of that. But like it's just a shame that like Isabel has to get to know her mom like this, because we end up finding out that Max isn't Luis's child. And I thought that was so interesting, because like I kept wondering that entire time. I was like, for Max to be like the special kid and everything, like to be the savior and everything, why wouldn't it balance with Luis? I was like, could it be only one, or was there, God, I'm so sorry, I'm mixing up names today. Isabel, like I was thinking, like since they're twins and everything, I was like, oh, there has to be like some connection there, maybe she develops it later on. But it's like, no, they're not related at all, which is sad. I mean, it's interesting because they've always treated each other as family, but obviously Nora was Michael's mom, Luis was Isabel's mom. But now it makes Max feel even more alone, because for him it's like, oh, like we're family. Like he grew up thinking like him and Luis were like, him and Isabel are family, and now thinking like, oh, like obviously we have the same mom and everything, but it turns out we don't. And even Harrison being like, the fact of the matter is you were born for something darker, and he's like, what does that mean? And now it's like, for Max, she's like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't, none of that matters. But for Max, it does matter. It's just because, like, for him, I think was so much of his life unsure, like, because he ends up talking about it later on, because so much of his life, it was already a bit of a mystery. Now the things that he thought were so certain to him, that him and Isabel were definitely brother and sister, that the fact of the matter is what he thought about, oh, Michael's the one that was kind of like the issues and stuff like that. It turns out that was like for him, like so much of what he thought at his core, his foundation, is now become rocky and shaky. And it's like kind of like almost like it's so interesting as Michael and Isabel are getting more clarity on their past and stuff like that. It's almost like Max is kind of losing clarity in certain regards and gaining it in others. So it's just interesting in the grand scheme of things. I also love, there was this interesting line earlier in the episode, because like obviously Alex is with obviously Isabel and Michael, and it's just like, oh, they couldn't be in the car, like they couldn't stay in the car because like Maria and Isabel were getting at each other's throats. It's like, for her, it's because even later on she's arguing, because it's like, Michael, you can't call shotgun in a car that's mine, because they're making this whole rules about shotgun. It's like, you can't call shotgun in a car that you haven't seen, and Isabel's calling shotgun, and Maria's like, you haven't seen the car. She's like, these are made up rules anyway, and it's just like made up rules that only apply to you, right? That everyone else kind of has to follow, but you're kind of the exception or whatever. But the fact is that he was looking at, like, Forrest was looking at Michael and Isabel's like, is this your girlfriend? And she's like, oh my God. And Michael's like, no. And Isabel's like, did we give off that air that we're that? It's almost like, oh, weird. But what's interesting though is this whole conversation about, like, at the time when they thought Luis had lost the baby, lost their sister, it made Isabel think like maybe the baby was doomed, because it was maybe a human and alien, because we don't know the like biology behind that, like whether that's something that could exist essentially. It's like, it's a situation of, would that being be able to live? And that's what she's thinking, like maybe the baby died not just from her being injured, but just maybe the baby was never going to make it anyway. So for her, it's like maybe she's thinking like her baby with Noah might have been the only chance she could ever have of having a kid, because she's thinking maybe it would take another alien's DNA. So maybe like human couldn't she couldn't get pregnant by a human, it would have to be another alien. So, but it was interesting because Michael offered up his, as the term gets used, baby gravy, which I'm like, I don't know why that's it's such a weird term for sperm. I don't know why. It's just kind of, I don't know, it just makes you go, why you have to, even him being like, I can't believe, I wish you didn't use the word baby gravy. But for him, it's like, he was offering to be basically the surrogate dad, because obviously for him to like, he was like, I will like a family someday, and if it means, helping Isabel in there, because I'm thinking, because wasn't Phoebe's situation exactly like that from Friends? Didn't she have her brother's baby? Wasn't her brother played by Giovanni Ribisi, if I remember correctly? I'm not like that well versed in Friends. I've seen episodes here and there, but that's why, if I remember correctly, right? Didn't she have his, like, her brother's baby, if I remember correctly? So it's like, I guess, because it seemed weird to me, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I mean, it's not weird. I mean, it's weird, but I mean, it's just like, I mean, it's weird, but not weird, I mean, and also like Michael and Isabel, they treat each other like family. They are, so it's like, it's not like they're not blood related, but I don't know. It's just interesting. I mean, it's like you're helping out family, so it's not like it's that big of a deal, but it's like, oh, have I told you, recently how much I love him? I was like, that was actually kind of nice of Michael stepping up, because obviously Max had like stormed off, because it's like, oh, like, here's another thing of like, oh, like, Noah almost killed you, because he's like, I remember I felt that, like, when you got rid of the baby, and it's like, that was Noah almost killing you again, because you felt so desperate that you had to get rid of the baby because of him. So it's like, that such a complicated, it's a complicated, situation. It turns even more interesting when we find out, like obviously, like, the word on the necklace, apparently, like, I forgot what the exact translation they ended up finding out was. It had something to do with the star, and they were like, wait, what? And then I'm like, wait, are we saying? And then like Isabel and Maria looking at each other when it kind of all clicks, because it's like, wait, when was your grandmother born? 48. She was adopted, right? It's like, yeah. I'm like, holy shit, because it's interesting, because I talked about this like a couple episodes back. I was under the impression like Roy was related to the DeLucas. Like the moment like Nora and Luis showed up on the farm and ran into Roy, I was like, at the end of that episode, I was like, oh, is he going to end up being like a DeLuca? I was like, are the DeLucas going to have like a connection to all this? But then it turned out he wasn't. I was like, oh, never mind. He is actually connected to the DeLucas. So it's just like, it's interesting and funny. Like, oh, I thought I was wrong. I thought that, and I thought, oh, never mind, I was wrong. Oh, turns out I was accidentally right. That was just interesting. And now it adds this complicated thing of like, oh yeah, like now Maria and Isabel are actually family, and it's just kind of that thing of them later on when they're trying to hold hands. They're like, oh no, this is weird. It's like, yeah. And even Michael at the time, it's like, oh, during that tense moment, he looks around, he's like, honestly, that makes a lot of sense that you two being related. It's like, yeah. I thought that was so fascinating. It makes you wonder, is that why the experiments, because they were like, oh, the reason why she got experimented on was just because like black people were just being used in experiments anyway. But part of me was like, was there already an underlining like alien ability in their family, considering like Louise was her great grandmother, so it makes you wonder, was that kind of already in their DNA? Maybe it wasn't necessarily from the experiments they went through, but just kind of like a family gene that ended up passing, down. So I just thought that was such a fascinating situation. It's like, that you're, complicated. And it's just like, it gets even more complicated because like now Michael's dating her, and he's like, because I think, what was it? I think like Isabel was joking like, yeah, I hope you're not about to propose to Maria, because like this family tree's already like branched off and complicated as it is. So it's like, yeah, that's really interesting. I just thought that was such an interesting development. But obviously it's a situation of like, yeah, for Isabel, like her mom ended up, kind of spending her life, sacrificing, despite her condition and everything. And it's like, for her and Maria, it is a situation of, if it wasn't for her sacrifice, neither one of them would be here right now. So it's kind of like, they kind of have to make the most of their lives because of the sacrifices that were made. And even like Maria later on, when Michael made her like that charm from the flower and everything he found at Luis's grave, because he's like, yeah, that flower grows from like, alien bodies, dead bodies. So he's like, I'm not telling you have to wear it, but but he was even shocked. He was like, oh, that didn't take much of a fight. It's because for her, it's like, I can't, she doesn't want to waste the like a lot of people sacrificed a lot for her to be where she is right now, so she doesn't want that to end up she doesn't want it to go to waste, so sacrifices. It's interesting too because like there is that thing of like she did have that vision earlier in the episode, but it wasn't like a vision of the future or anything like it typically was. It was a vision of the past. It was her, like, I think, arguing with her mom. Maybe that was set up for this whole reveal or something like that. I don't know. Maybe there was something deeper to that. Like, I don't know. Maybe it isn't just being able to see the future. Maybe she kind of has that thing where it's like she can also see past events type of situation as well. Like maybe it's like, oh, the history tied to certain places. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe her powers, or maybe it was a specific vision because it was trying to, like, it was etching her towards a specific memory because it needed her to remember something that was crucial to the future or something. I don't know. It made my mind curious about that. Then there's also like the very complicated aspect to this episode with the whole situation with Liz and her dad, because like for whatever reason, like Ice was in the hospital at the time and her dad was there, and it's like, oh shit, because obviously like she was there because her dad had his checkups and stuff like that, but then like she was also there checking on Cam, because Cam was like, her condition was like kind of like she's getting like migraines and stuff like that. So what ends up happening though is that, she was trying to get, like, Liz was trying to get her dad out of there as soon as possible, but the ICE agent ends up stopping him. But obviously for Liz, it's like he's in the process of getting his green card, is this and that, but it's like no matter what's happening, like the fact is they still take him, and it's just like, she's like, no, like at least let him take his jacket, it's cold out there. And it's like, and her and Cam ended up talking because like for her it's like there was always a part, and it's actually sad, like when she breaks it down, she was like, I was even afraid of, telling Santa like what I wanted, because I was afraid that, maybe Santa was going to need, documents or something like that, so like for her, she's basically lived her entire life in fear of this very moment, like that her entire world could come crashing down like this. And that's why Cam wants to help. She's like, yeah, like you've literally lived in fear for the past 28 years. The least I can do is, deal with a couple of migraines. Because she even talked about like their escape plan, like what she was going to do if they're like, her and Rosa came up with like ideas of like what they were going to do in case like their parents ever got like deported or something like that. And it's like, it's a sad reality that they had to like think about, and it's like, she's always lived every day with fear that this would, but I think it's just that thing of like, you just hope that it never comes and that day came. And obviously she's there trying to talk to them, but it's like okay, I know my dad's here. It's like I don't really know. It's like they made the whole situation a little more complicated, especially the officer in particular that she's interacting with most of the episode. Like he didn't make that easier. Like I don't know. Like for me, it's just like he could have been more compassionate. It's like, I understand, like he could understand her frustrations and the complications behind it. And the thing is, what makes matters worse for her too, it's like Cam had to be the one to say something. It's like, oh, are you listening to her just because it's a thing of like, well, is it because she's also a cop, or is it because she's white, or is it because she's a white, it's like, oh, like, would you listen to me if I was blonde, is it? So for her, it's like, you only like, oh, you're being all chill and everything and talking to Cam and explaining everything, but like you're not listening to me, which obviously it's frustrating Liz even more, So obviously she, it wants to, look after Cam because like obviously Cam's condition kind of gotten worse, and she's like, for her, it's like, I need a distraction, because it's like, yeah, your dad, you can see him Tuesday or something like that, because that's when like his court date or something like that comes up. As like I said, it's a situation of like, you could put a little more human compassion behind it. That's just how I felt about it. But it turns out the reason why Cam's feeling the way she has is because, what was it, like, they basically did something to her spine. She's like, wait, was like my spine tapped or something like that? It's like, for what purpose? Like, are they drawing like bone marrow or something? Like, I'm curious, like, what that was all about. Also, like, this drug that was in her system. There's also the interesting thing of her calling in a favor with someone, and it's like, oh, you have anyone you can call on? And she's like, hey, it's Liz. And I was like, are you calling who I think you are? And lo and behold, none other than Diego. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I was like, oh, that's because it turns out like his mom is a senator or whatever. So it's like, oh, kind of a thing of like, kind of that awkward thing of, it's like, oh yeah, like the whole like elephant in the room about the whole like, yeah, it's like, how are you? He's like, yeah, but my fiance left me. It's just kind of like, ooh. He's like, I'm kidding, I'm joking, sorry. It's like, I'm good, I'm actually seeing someone. And she's like, I'm seeing someone too. But part of me was like, Is that true? Or is that him just saying I'm seeing someone just to make it a little less like weird about like, hey, you're my ex fiance, you kind of just bailed on me? So I'm like, they talked about it. I just didn't expect it to actually like come up the way it did. I mean, to be fair, this is a season full of surprises. How we got her and Rosa's mom popping up in the story and everything too. So I shouldn't be too surprised. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting development. Obviously, Max and them get back in time, and obviously, like because of the favor, she was able. Because Diego's mom was able to kind of pull some strings and stuff like that. But obviously, it's like Liz pissed off some of those officers, so that's not going to be like a situation of it's completely going away. She's kind of pissed him off, so they're going to have a kind of a little bit of a personal vendetta against her. So this fight she's dealing with isn't over, and he's like offering her a lawyer, like, oh yeah, lawyer and everything. She's like, it's kind of like you've done enough for me, so. It's like her dad is okay. He's back home right now. So for her, that's enough. And obviously Mac's upset because like he wishes he could have been there for her, during such a time. And for him, Max makes that whole, because obviously she's like, I want to know what you're going through because like he's drinking and stuff. So for him, it's a situation if he feels completely and utterly alone. And she's like, wow, you feel alone even though I'm here with you. But it's just like I said earlier, and he had this idea what his family was, and now he realizes like, wait, now it's like, oh, not even, Isabel and Michael have always been family to me. At least he knew like, hey, at least in his mind, it's like, hey, me and Isabel are related, we're family, but then it's like, oh, apparently we're not. So it cracks that foundation more. It's like, I mean, it still doesn't, I mean, and even Isabel was kind of saying that regardless of them not being, twins like they thought they were, it's like, you're always going to be my brother, type of situation. So I thought that was kind of nice, but it almost led to this argument between Liz and Max, because obviously he's like, for the fact of the matter is you didn't, because it's almost a thing of like he wants to feel needed. It's like, oh, she's like, what did you want to go, like, what, save the day or something? You wanted me crying in a corner here, waiting for you to kind of be there to kind of comfort me, while my dad was in a situation. He's like, no, it's not, it's not like that, but it almost could have gone down a nasty direction, but it was just a thing of like, it was just a complicated situation that they were kind of dealing with. Then Diego calls Liz to tell her about the drug, and it turns out that drug is a memory wiping drug that apparently like it's military grade and stuff like that. So like, but it's not used in any other sense other than combat wise, so like no one really has access to this because it's like private company owns it or whatever. So I'm like, okay, so is this related to Charlie? Because obviously like Max keeps thinking it's alien related, but then Liz is like, I don't, because Liz and Cam are thinking like, no, this probably has something to do with what happened to Charlie. But it's like the more time that comes, you don't, so it's interesting, especially because of the marks, because obviously there's also the whole situation with like Alex, because he had actually talked to his brother about like, yeah, like, him getting away from their dad, and now that his dad has actually kind of gotten better, like, he was talking to his brother about the fact is of like, yeah, like dad seems like, he's that evil in him is kind of gone since the stroke, which we as the audience know is like, oh, but he's been faking that, frailness, that he's weak or something. And that's all for the purpose of it's all for the purpose of this, where you kind of start thinking the better of him. Like Alex is willing to just kind of let go of the hate, but his brother was like, I'll hold on. Basically, he was basically saying, I'll hold on to it for you, type of situation. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And even bringing it up to Michael, like, yeah, that ship piece, it wouldn't go to your ship, but maybe if I give it to my dad, he'll lead us in the right. He's like, whoa, your dad, the same person who hunts aliens and stuff like that. For him, it's like, for Michael, it's like when we were younger, your idealism and your optimism, basically seeing the best in people, believing that humanity is better than what they are. Like, obviously, Michael's very pessimistic about people. Alex isn't. And it's like, but the fact is that was kind of adorable, and that was a beautiful aspect. That's something I loved about you when we were 17. We're adults now. You can't be so stupid and naive to believe that people can change. But for him, he's like, I don't want to go my entire. It's like, why do you still wear that thing? Because you gotta hold, because you want to hold on to that pain. He's like, I'm not gonna hold on to this anger and pain. Like, I'm not saying that I trust my dad. I'm always gonna hate him, but I'm going to be willing to give him a shot at changing it. He's shown that he can change. So once again, sadly, that's not truth, but in Alex's mind it is, because he doesn't see his dad for manipulating him. I mean, I think for Michael it benefits him. The fact is that he is pessimistic as he is, because it keeps him alive. Well, his pessimism, like, obviously it causes a complication because he always kind of keeps people at arm's reach, but in this case, he's kind of right to. And obviously he was like, I can't let you leave with this piece. And he's like, what are you going to do? Fight me for it? But Michael just lets him go. Because it's like, I was wondering, I was like, are you going to do, like, don't tell me you're going to use your powers or something against Alex. But he doesn't. He just lets him go. But it's like, oh, that's not going to work out well. But then Alex gets attacked. So it's like, but whoever it was, it's not the same person who kidnapped Charlie and Cam, or even potentially, Maria's mom, just because they didn't do it wasn't the same situation. So part of me wonders, was that actually, could that have been his brother that took him, his brother that's still closely tied to his dad, or could that have been Jesse himself, Who knows? Because that all kind of got me thinking about, well, who is the person behind all this? Because Max, ends up taking more of the serum to like recover his memories, and he remembers like Luis cutting him free, because he started thinking like maybe the devil she was running from was him, because he's like, the fact of the matter is I was chained up. He was like, maybe I was chained up for a reason, not like in a torturous, abusive sense, but maybe because I was so dangerous. But then in his memory he sees that Luis actually saved him, because like obviously like Isabel said like, hey, like, look at this hand. That's not someone like, oh, Luis wants to be touched by. So it's like, it's someone else that she was running from. You can tell, even though the person got cropped out the picture, which obviously memory shows you at the beginning, like when that person that was on the ship, who's also like I said, it's the fire person who shot the fire, like when they landed and everything, because they're under the impression like, oh, they're the only 3 aliens on this planet, not knowing there is another one. So I'm assuming it could be a situation that this 4th alien is actually the one that's a part of this group, like that private company that's got that memory wiping drug. He might be a part of that, because we haven't seen him in the entirety of this. So it's like there's at least one more alien other than Noah. There was Noah. So there's not just a 4th alien, there's a 5th alien out there. So that turns into the situation of like, who was that person? Because whoever it was, Luis fought with them. We also saw some of the alien weapons, because we see swords. It's the first instance of like kind of seeing that. But like Luis was rescuing him. So it must be a situation of, once again, the whole conversation was that Noah said that their planet was at war. He must have been the key deciding factor. Like Max can be either the great savior or destroyer. So it's probably a situation of like, either they captured this savior because it's like, oh, we're going to use him as a destroyer, or just so he's not a savior for the other side, he's going to be a savior for our side. But Luis saved him because it's like, oh, like you could be like our great, hero savior. I don't know. I'm curious to see, because it does seem, because even Max has said it himself, like there's a darkness in him. He was like, the fact is I get sick every time I heal people, but he's like, when I killed Noah, it felt so good. And he's like, I hate Noah so much that I get, I've been chasing that. Like there was like an ecstasy, a high to killing Noah. And it's like, the fact of the matter is I could, I want to kill him over and over again. So it's like there's that little bit of darkness in him. So that's what kind of makes me think maybe he can lean either way, that his destiny wise he could be a savior or a destroyer. But like it tiptoes towards like Max learning a little bit more about his past. So I'm interested to kind of dive into that. But like I said, I think Alex's situation is connected yet unrelated to all of that, because I think Max is specifically connected to, like I said, the person behind Maria, Charlie, and Cam's kidnapping and disappearances. I think it's 100% got to be the alien dude, because he must have went after Mimi, because she registers like Luis, probably. Maybe that's what that was supposed to be, or maybe trying to use her ability, because Maria was kind of hidden the entire time, maybe, type of situation. I don't know, like, so probably wasn't aware of her ability. That, like I said, that's just my thought process about it. I'm probably like off basis of that, but either way, I'm curious to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.